All right, we're back. We are COMP125 in the summer 2018 semester. That's client-side web development at Centennial. And we are, I know what that was missing. I totally see what's missing now. We are week 4, part 3. I just didn't name it properly. I'll have to change the name later, of our broadcast. So what we're talking about today is more exception handling. But I want to continue with what we were working on yesterday, which was this form we were building. So we're building a form in our contact page, contact.html. That's what we were using yesterday. And if I bring up the command prompt, if I go light server, what we have is a form, but like I said yesterday, here's my contact page. It's really big, right? So I think it's too big. And there's a couple of techniques we can use in, techniques we can use here in, with Bootstrap to kind of reduce the size of this. Okay, and we're going to talk about this. So 2 things to note. When you look at the contact page in Bootstrap, there's 2 parts. Navbar is a separate part than the contact form. And notice that when I put it in the container, right, this is just Bootstrap. It's not really exception handling yet, but we're going to get to that. Once you put it into a class of container, what happens with Bootstrap is it pushes it to the right a little bit. So let me show you what I mean. So if I do an inspect, right, this time I'll inspect the actual page. If I look here, you can see that if I go to the container, that's what the container does. So I'm just hovering over here on the right where it says elements, and I can inspect each of the elements on the page. One of them is, for example, the nav bar, right, which is up here. So you can see the nav bar doesn't have not a lot of there's no margin, right, but it does have padding and that kind of stuff. And remember the box model, the way the box model works is you have a box within a box within a box, right? That's how the box model works in HTML. So now we're talking about HTML here for a second. So if I go to the container class, here's the container class that's surrounding the div tag. You can see that I've got these margins. The orange area is margins that surround the page, right? Because I've used the container class, that's what the container class does. It adds margins on the right and left and centers the page. It kind of creates this margin auto CSS configuration here. So I'm just pointing this out because some of you may have looked at this. And if I actually open this up a little bit more, you can see down here, this is the actual, kind of the box model down here. You can see that if I kind of hover over certain elements, it'll show you which element is what, right? Now, if I go over here to this container, I do the same thing. You can see that that is the margin, right? You can see that there's padding involved, right? And here's the content. That's the content. So this is the box model right here, okay? Now, why am I showing you this? Remember we talked about the 3 pillars? You can't do JavaScript without knowing this stuff. This is important to know, right? If you're going to do DOM stuff, right? So that's why it's so big. That's why I've got all this, and this stretches from this part over here to this part, because there's nothing to contain the fields, right? We've got our whole form, but my form is the only container that's containing the fields. The form itself has to be contained in another container in order for it to, scrunch up a little bit. Yeah.
But can't we fix the width of these fields?
I could do that, but I don't recommend that approach. I recommend putting all the form itself in another container, another div tag, that you can limit how big the div tag is. Okay, and I got to explain a couple things before we move on about Bootstrap. You guys are potentially learning Bootstrap for the first time, right? So one of the things we haven't really talked about at all is layout, right? So let's do that. So if we go to documentation under Bootstrap, you can see that on the left, there are several different options. One of them is layout. And under layout, what you have is it kind of talks about this idea of containers. So this is the container. And what it says is once you use a container, it kind of creates this large space, right? And what it also has is something called these responsive breakpoints. So what are responsive breakpoints? We want to serve our page out to different devices. We want to give our page to a mobile device. We want to give our page, you guys should know this from your previous class, but let's assume you don't. If I want to put this my page on a tablet computer or some other kind of machine or whatever, maybe it's going to be on my watch in the future. I don't know why, but let's suppose that it's going to be there. There's going to be a different viewport size potentially. And when there's different viewport size, we'll have different breakpoints, which indicate the size of my viewport. So these breakpoints are listed here. And I know it's kind of hard to see, so I'll make it a little bit bigger for you guys because I know that when you're watching this from home or even here in class, you can't see this stuff very easily. But you can see that here are some small devices. So landscape phones, 576 and up, right? That's landscape. Then there's tablets and so on. You have different minimum widths of these things. And they also break it down into something called small, medium, large, and extra large. And there's also extra small. They talked about that. So that's the first breakpoint is what sizes that we're going to be using. All right. So that's kind of really important to understand that, right? So breakpoints in a page, right? Because what we want to do is we want to use this idea of tables and rows because I want to create a grid. So if you look on the left here under layout, there's something called grid, right? This is really important because you need to know the grid in order for you to lay out your page for your portfolio site properly if you're doing it by yourself. Notice that we have, this is the structure we have. We have a class of container, and inside that we have a div with a class of row, and inside that we have a div with the class of column dash small. Column dash SM, SM meaning small, is the target that the viewport you're targeting. So if I'm targeting, guys, I can't talk over you. I'm sorry. So if I'm targeting small screens, then I'm going to use the dash small, SM, right? And again, small is for slightly larger phones. Extra small is for older phones like an iPhone 4, the old iPhone 4s, 320 by 480, that kind of stuff, right? And then there's different size classes as you keep going higher and higher, right? We want to do responsive web design nowadays because it's modern, right? If you guys are doing static pages that only don't respond at all, you're living in 1990s, right? That doesn't exist anymore, all right? Especially if you're making a page for an employer or something, they must be responsive these days, okay? In order for you to be kind of professional web developers, at least at the very basics, right? So what we have is this idea of the surrounding container, right? So the surrounding container itself is the first thing that we saw. It creates this box around everything. So if we look at the box model, it creates this area here. But now we have to surround this thing with some kind of an additional container that allows us to break our content into different columns. So I can have multiple columns here. Like what if, as an example, I wanted to have let's say I only wanted to use 6 columns, right? When am I saying 6? What do I mean? Well, imagine if we have 12 columns. If I divide this page into 12 columns. If I divide 100% by 12, I think it's roughly 8, something like that, 8%, 8 point something percent. So each column would then be approximately 8% of the width of the page, right? I'm using percentages because it'll be more dynamic, right? The bigger the page, the more pixels, right? 8% of the pixels of the page, it'll be divided into more pixels if it's a larger viewport. If it's a smaller viewport, there'll be less pixels, right? That means the columns will be smaller. So, but still, we're going to use this idea of this 12-column grid. And the 12-column grid idea is something that works here as well as the other framework foundation that I talked about. Other frameworks use kind of the same idea, 12 columns. But going back to the grid system, the container is the outside. And then what we have is inside, we have this row. Okay, and each row can have its own columns. Okay, so it doesn't have to have the same column layout that the previous row had. So I can have different pieces on the page anywhere I want, right? And it gives you the idea here. So again, extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large would be the breakpoints. And then what you have is this idea of auto layout columns. So here's an example of 2 columns. So this is column number 1, and here's column number 2. And notice how they're separated in equal portions, right? Here, the class is just column. I don't have to specify how much. It's divided equally between one column and another. So if I have 2 columns and I want to put 2 different pieces of content into one column or the other, right? I don't have to specify how much it is. It's like 6 and 6 is really what's happening here, right? Here's an example of 3 columns. 1, 2, 3 columns, right? 3 different pieces of content, right? And if you notice again, I don't have to specify how many, how much percent or whatever. I just say column, column, column. And then as long as it's in the same row container, remember, each row can have different columns, right? Then it's not a problem. Yes, this is the first kind of thing we talked about. Now, I did go over it with Junior yesterday, so Junior's got a bit of a preview. But if you look here, there's also a way of splitting across different columns. We can say, once we use W-100, that means 100%, right? So we're saying basically that these two things took up 100%, these first two columns, and then I can just say the next 2 columns on the next line. So the W-100 actually separates columns across different lines. So I can just use column, 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 and then the W-100 is a separator. That's all it does, okay? So those are options you can use, but you can also get very specific. I'm going to skip down here to the more specific way of doing things. So here, this is very important. So we have this variable with content idea, where we have a column dash the breakpoint and then dash auto. Okay, so what does this mean? It means that I can say, well, I'm column small auto, right, as an example, and we'll just automatically adjust, the column to the size of the container, right? And here's an example if I want to use column dash large 2. What does this mean? It means that I want to use two columns, right, width for this particular column. So instead of using 1 column of 8%, I'm using 2. That's 16% of the page width. That's what I'm specifying, approximately, right? And I can do the same thing for the next one. So if you notice there's 1 of 3, there's some kind of variable width content, column medium auto. So I've got, like I said, I want 2 on the other side, and I want some kind of variable width in the middle, right? So if you notice here, that's like, here's 2 on this side, variable width on this side, and some kind of 2 columns on the other side. And if you notice, there's not the same, right? Because it's trying to fit in 2 columns, and it doesn't understand what I want with the medium auto. But the reason why I'm pointing this out is because this is the kind of stuff we need to do for our form. I'm just going to skip down here to where there's more. So here's an example of the 12 column output here. Column 8. So there's 8 columns. That means 8 times 8. That's 64% of the page approximately, right? And then the rest of the page is divided into these other 4 columns on the right. So I can have a sidebar, no problem, right? I can create a sidebar on one side, columns on the left side. I can do all kinds of stuff, and I lay out everything without you having to do any of your own CSS at all. That's why I'm showing you this, right?
And that when you test the divs with fixed dimensions, that won't work.
No. That's why it's better to do. Don't use fixed dimensions. Don't use pixels. This many pixels. If you use fixed dimensions, then it won't be responsive, and that's bad, right? You want to make a responsive website. This is the way to do it, right? So again, if you notice, there's this way where I can say column, 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 4 columns of equal width, right? Or I can specify column 8 and column 4, and it'll give me the the way I want to do it. You can also stack it in different ways, and it talks about all this stuff here. So please refer to this grid. And I'm going to actually put the exact link to this because it's really, really important for you to understand this up on Slack, right? Because I know some of you are just learning Bootstrap for the first time. And what I want to do here is I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of what I'm looking for, all right? Because you should be able to lay out your stuff any way you like, right? With, using the Bootstrap grid system, you can lay out your page any way you like, almost like a designer would lay it out in a print studio. Okay, so imagine if I take clippings of my columns, like literally, and like put it down on paper and say, I want this column over here, I want this information over here, I want this thing. You can do all that stuff using the grid system with Bootstrap. Okay, so here's some more examples. Again, column 12 and then column medium 8. That's interesting. So it says stack the columns on mobile, but making one full width and the other half width. Okay, so column 12 and column medium 8, right? So this is medium 8 when it comes to not being on mobile. Column 12 or stacked. So stacked, what it does is on mobile devices, it'll actually stack the columns one on top of the other one. Column 12 means take the whole width. So in medium devices, take the entire width. But on small devices, stack, right? That's what it will end up doing. So you can do that. You can have multiple size classes in your class here to kind of specify how many columns we want. You can also specify vertical alignment, right? So you can have where the information appears in the columns, which is kind of interesting. This kind of vertical alignment if you want, like total control if you want of your page, right? Which is kind of interesting to do. You can also justify the entire row. You can justify start, center, or end. So you can specify where the content starts. So here's an example of when you do columns in the middle and so on. You can see that there's one of two columns and there's some space in the middle. You can have space in the middle by using an offset. We'll talk about that in a bit. Okay. And so on. I'm not going to go in through this whole, kind of the whole specification here, but it's actually a very interesting and, has become more of a standard way of doing things with front-end CSS frameworks, where we have a set of columns and you allocate how much space you want for each of your content areas. That's what we're doing. So going back to our code, how do we make that happen?
Number of rows we don't define.
Sorry?
Number of rows.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to define one row that holds my entire, page, as an example, my form, right? So to do that, what I need for the beginning is a div tag with a class of row. Okay, so that's the first thing I need to do. Notice that I need to put all of this inside of there. That's the first thing. So far, right? We'll talk about maybe I'll need multiple rows later, but this whole form itself, up to the end of the form, I want to put this and the H1 and H4 tags for now inside of this row. So I'm going to use the Alt key and the up arrow, and I'm going to push this up into there, right? So that's what it does. So I don't have to cut and paste. And if I do it again, you can see that it's just going to move it so it's tighter inside of there, right?
So press Alt key and
when you have everything highlighted, you can move content around the page the way you like. Yeah.
Type on multiple lines.
And you type on multiple lines. Like highlight multiple lines, you mean?
Yes.
Like if I kind of...
In column mode.
Yeah, you can do that too, right? I believe it's Control-Alt or Shift-Alt.
Control.
Undo. Shift-Alt.
Say again, please.
Shift-Alt.
Shift-Alt.
Yeah, so notice if I go like this, if I kind of start highlighting here, I can press like Shift and then Alt. The Alt key will allow me to highlight multiple columns. Yeah.
Overall. Press Alt.
Yeah. You can look that specification up on your own, but that's where it is. Shift and Alt will allow me to kind of highlight multiple columns inside the thing. But anyway, so now that I've got this in here, it still hasn't changed anything. Like if I save this page and I go back out to my page, you can see that there is no immediate change, except for this. So this is what's happened. I mean, what I've done is I've put everything in this row, right? And we've broken something because, I mean, obviously I made a mistake somewhere, right? And I can undo this change if I want to, but you notice that nothing's right here, right? This shouldn't be like this. And somehow the contact us and all these fields are over here too. That's just kind of weird. So let's undo that. So kind of undo. Great thing about doing this kind of stuff, we can always undo it. I probably missed a div tag or something, which is totally fine. But the other way to do it is if I say save and go back, you can see that this is the normal way of doing it. If I cut and paste, sometimes, this is the easier way to do it, cut and paste. And if I save it, now we're back to this. So I know this isn't wrong, right? So this is what row does. Row, when I use my class of row, right, which is what we've done here, and I put all this stuff inside, unless I specify columns, right, then I'm going to have this funky thing happening. Let's undo that change again to show you that. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. There we go. We see that this is empty now. Let's continue to do something else. Let's check this out. We need two more things in here. We need another div tag with a class of column, and I want to specify an offset. And what you can do is offsets. We can say how many columns do I want to kind of push over from the left, as an example. So I can say that, well, I want my content to have 6 columns. So, and I want, or let's say 8 columns. And I want out of 12. That means there's 4 more columns left over. So if I just said column dash medium for medium screens dash 8, right? What this is going to do is going to specify that I want 8 medium columns for my content. Okay, let's see how that works. So kind of take all that stuff again, cut it, put it over here, paste it, and whenever you want to, again, you can kind of Control A and then right click and format document to kind of move everything so it looks nice, which is what you always want to do. Because you don't want your document to be, like especially your HTML document to look ugly. That would be bad. One thing it does do though is sometimes what it'll do is reformat my links, and sometimes I don't like that, but this is okay. All right, so back to this. This is what it did. Notice how the actual form now, it only takes up 8 columns, right? Maybe this is too big. Well, let's go back. I haven't centered it or anything. All I'm doing is specifying how much my content should take up, right? So going back to this, I said 8. Let's go to 6 and see what it does. So here's 6. Is that better? I think so, right? And again, if you want to look at the CSS for this, so here's my container. My container hasn't changed. Here's the row, specifies the content. Inside the row, I have this medium columns. I have 6 columns out of 12 that's being used for this particular part, right? Again, guys, I'm trying to help you for your assignment number 1, assignment number 2, all the assignments coming out. So you understand how it works out. No. So if I go into, not with this model, there's other models that allow you different things. But now if you look at this, right, each of these things are inside of this class column dash medium dash 6, right? So there's a couple things I can do. I've specified this. I could notice I also have this additional space over here. That additional space comes from the container. The container gives me margin on both sides, right? So that extra space, when I take 12 columns, I mean 12 columns inside of that container, not the entire page, just from here to about here, right? Not for the whole page, because it's inside of a container. I could change the container type too. Instead of container, I can, and again, I'm going to modify it here just to show you. I can say container dash fluid, right? And container fluid actually pushes this over on the left. Notice what that did, right? So container fluid actually took away the margins that I get from container, right? So it's almost using the total space of the entire screen, right? You understand that? 2 different classes. One that has margins, that's called container. The other one that has very little margins, that's container dash fluid, okay? Notice the spacing here. That's a little bit too tight for me, right? So if I was going to use container fluid, then, and I'm going to modify this right here. What if I wanted to use an offset? And again, before I do any coding, I can check it off here, right? I can say offset dash medium dash 2 as an example. And then what that'll do is it'll add offset. It'll actually create a column on this side.
So
again,
offset is from left side or right side or both?
Left side. Right. So if you notice on the left side, I've got this column, 2 columns that are specified out of a total of 12.
But
potentially.
Specify both.
That's it. Yeah, you can. But so that's what I've done so far. So I've got 8 columns, but 2 of them approximately, that's 16%, is just space. That's all I've done. I've just pushed over. I've created a margin on this side, on the left side only. If I go back to what it was before, it may not look right, but I want to show you what happens. If I go back, instead of container fluid, I just go back to container, right? Now you can see how it changes, right? It's kind of pushed on this side, right? I'm showing you this just so you understand how the grid system works, right? So that's this. So that's one option. We can use this column dash medium dash offset, or offset dash medium dash 2, right? That's what it starts off with. And I can put as many, but notice that's extra space here because of my container. So container adds space, and then I put the column on top of that, right? That's one way of doing it, okay? I'm pointing this out because there's other ways, right? The other way to do it is if going back to Bootstrap, you can see that if I want to center something on the screen, there was an example up here that showed you how to find that. That's why I kind of got this link for you guys, right? Here it is, this one here. Look at the example here, row, justify, content, medium, center. Okay, so what am I doing? I'm taking the entire row that I've got, 6 columns, and I'm centering it. That sounds better. I think that's what I want to do, right?
So this can be applied to the whole,
the entire row.
only at row level,
Each row. And this is, right now, my row contains everything.
not to the body of the.
No, just the row. So, for example, if I go row, and instead of, now you notice that I didn't put in the offset here, right? I'm still using container, okay? But if I do next to row, if I say justify dash content dash medium dash center, so justify content medium for medium-sized screens, center. Now, for smaller screens, it won't center it. For larger screens, it won't center it. You have to put in all those things too, right? Only for medium screens, it'll do this. If I do this, if I go back to this, you can see now that it's approximately centered on both sides, right? So if I go back to this, take a look. So this is centered. And then if I go to in here to the row, it's centered. So there's equal amounts of space on the left and on the right. Okay. However, notice that the content itself is not centered inside, right? That's something else. This content inside is left justified like normal, right? So if I want to center my contact us, right, as an example, or I want to say I want to center everything, which is kind of weird. I never do this, but let's say if I wanted to. Again, just to show you, right, that means that inside of my div class, where it says column medium 6, everything inside this div class, I want to say that it's centered. I can come in here and then type in, just to show you, text. I believe it's text-center, and that'll just center the text. If you want to totally center something like a label, I know this is terrible, but if you want to center a label or something, that's why I'm doing it here into the browser and not in code. Let's check it in the browser, see how it looks, and then we'll code it when it works. Okay, right? So you don't waste time. So I could do it this way. Now this looks terrible, right? But it allows me latitude. A couple of things also. Notice that this is a little bit too tight up here, right? That's a different thing. That's your custom CSS that you can use, like for any medium content. Because I know I have this like nav bar. Maybe I want to push all my content down a little bit. That's a me CSS thing, not a Bootstrap CSS thing, right? So maybe I want to surround everything with something called like main content, right? And then I push all my main content down by like 10 more pixels. I add margin of 10 or something like that to the top of my content. So if I did that, and notice that, I mean, I have access to doing all that stuff right here, right? So on the bottom, you have also CSS. Here's all my CSS stuff right here, right? I could add my own CSS in here as well. I could go through here and like physically type my own CSS. If I go on the bottom, right, and if I want to, kind of type in my own stuff, I could physically start typing whatever CSS I want, right, or add it to something else, like right in here, right? But I'm not going to do that. What I want to try and do is, first of all, we don't need this. But so this works, this content medium center. But what if I took away the mediums? So I said, okay, I don't care about medium screens. How about all screens? I want all my screens to be centered. So it doesn't matter whether it's medium screen or small screen. Well, then you're back to this, right? And so now what this does is, I'm going to take this away for a second. Actually, if you look at here, you have the ability for you to look at different kinds of screen sizes, right? Where I can expand or change my screen size. And what it's going to try and do as much as possible is center it, even when it's unreasonable, right? And that's why we have different size classes, because sometimes it doesn't make sense for us to center something, right? It doesn't make sense for us to center something. But here it looks okay. But once we go to about here, something's wrong, right? And notice that we almost want to make this contact us and stuff like this smaller, right? Which is something else from a responsive perspective. You want to change my size, the size of my text, right? So it's smaller. But this is the good thing about this little option here, which toggles on like kind of the mobile mode, if you will. So you can check out the width and size of the screen. So here you can see that the breakpoint doesn't have the toggle. Here I have my hamburger. That's what this thing is, right? And here, as I go smaller, somehow what happens is this contact us and all fields are required flips to the other side like this. See? That's not good. I don't like that. It changes my layout, right? And I want my layout to keep the same thing. This is okay, right? But what ends up happening is because I said 6 columns on a mobile device ain't right. It's almost like I need like 8 columns on a mobile device, right? With less margin on the left and on the right. I got the exact same margin. I got 2 columns on the left and 2 columns on the right, only 6 columns in the middle. So if I went back to this and I said column 6, but what if I said, column dash small, right, dash 8? I can do that, right? So I can modify, I can have both settings, right? So column small, again, doesn't really modify everything, so I can still go here and still some space over here. But column small takes care of this size, right? So once I go a little bit bigger, you can see that it's going to have more space for small sizes, right? And then there's this other stuff. I can go back. She's just emailing me like my wife is emailing me like crazy now. I can also do extra small. So column small 8, and maybe small is no good. Maybe I like medium 6 or whatever. But I can also specify more. I can say, well, okay, what about column, dash extra small, 10. I can do that. I can have different size classes for my row, right? So now if I go back, if I go to extra small, we can kind of modify that, right? Now, actually, it's not kind of turning out. Let's just make sure this is kill this so I can switch back and forth. Out here, here, and here. There we go. Go back to that. Sorry. So let's just if only oh yeah, it's probably because of this. But let me if I just go back and just take this away. So instead of column 6, I say column dash medium dash 6. So there's all the different sizes. I think that'll do it. Yeah. So here's this one. And as I scrunch in, you can see that it bounces. There's 10, right? For extra small. And as I go to this is small, goes back to kind of 8. Or there you go. So you can see how it changes sizes depending on the size of my screen, right? Because sometimes we want this in a smaller device, right? We don't want margins, right? That's kind of interesting. So what it does is it doesn't mess around with my layout. That's what I want, right? So you can specify that kind of stuff more often. And I'm pointing this out to you because sometimes if you don't have this breakout a little bit, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I'd want for small devices, instead of 8, I want 10 as well, right? So you can experiment, right? You can kind of see what the effect is going to be on smaller devices. So again, I go back to this, and then, so if I go back to here, at this breakpoint, I can see that it's already 10, right? That's small. And then this becomes medium. And large, notice that there's also a point in here that it's weird, right? Because I haven't done large, right? So small, medium, large, and extra large, right? It's almost like I got to do all of them, almost. If I don't specify, though, like I said before, then it's just one size fits all, which doesn't always work for every use case, right? So again, maybe what I want is for large, column, medium, 6. Doesn't matter by the way, it doesn't matter the order. You're just saying, so if I remember column dash, large, and I want to make it 8 again. So for large screens and medium screens, I want 8, right? As an example. Well, notice that didn't really change anything, right? There is a space in between one of these breakpoints that's not quite right. This is okay, but this is not okay, right? And again, you can see the size of the breakpoint as well. Again, am I going to mark you on this kind of stuff because I didn't ask for responsive design? No. Chances are no, right? But I want you to be aware of it because if you're not aware of this stuff, then you don't know how to Bootstrap. You don't know how to use Bootstrap at all. Like this is like the foundation of how to use Bootstrap, right? So I think we're pretty good. I'm going to go back to the single column thing. So I'm going to go back to column medium 6 because right now I want to just make an example of this part, right? So I'm going to go back to this. And this looks okay, right? Also, what I want to do is make my my button right now is pretty small, and if I want to, I can make it larger, right? Again, going back to Bootstrap, instead of the layout side, I can go to components, right? And I can go to buttons, and you can see that there's different components, buttons, different kinds, different colors. So primary is blue, secondary is this gray, success, danger, warning. You can see the different colors that they kind of give you by default. Links and so on. There's button tags. As an example, you can have button tags. There's outline buttons if you want to do a different style of button. Like lots and lots of options for you guys. But this is what I want. Maybe I want a large button or a small button here. So I can say button dash large. So if I go back here and I say, well, for this submit button here, I want button primary is fine, but button dash large is what I want in here instead of a small button, right? So what does this look like? It looks like a little bit better, right? Because small button maybe is not what I want, right? And then the other one is I talked about this idea of a card, right? So I have this card, and what it does, it creates almost like a kind of a border around this thing all together. And you're going to say, Tom, well, I can do my own border. I don't need, I can do my own CSS. So far, we haven't written one piece of CSS, right? That's what I'm trying to get. This is not a CSS course, but I want you to understand a CSS framework to help you, right? Because you're going to need it when you do Angular. You're going to need it when you do React. You're going to need it when you do other things because so many frameworks, so many other frameworks use Bootstrap as a CSS framework, right? So if you don't understand Bootstrap, then you don't understand client-side web development, right, in some ways. All right, so, and again, it could be Bootstrap, it could be material design, it could be foundation, it could be something. You need to use some kind of framework these days, or you make your own. That's the other option. You know, kind of model your own framework on Bootstrap or whatever. You can make your own 12-column grids and stuff. All right, so you've got your card, and what it has is this card body. All it is going to create this kind of container that looks like this with a little bit of a border, right? So if I just added this around my stuff, I can do that, right? So I can have a card and a card body. I want the card to be outside and the card body to be the actual around the form, but not around my title. Okay, I'm going to put something else there. So if you notice, again, I can, around the form itself, I'm going to do that here. I'm going to put a div with a class of card, right? And actually, let's go up here. I'll put that over here first. So in here, div with a class of card, right? And my card body, so let's put all this stuff in there. So up to the form. So I want to put that in there, right? And now that that's inside of there with the class of card, there's two parts to the card. There's the card body, which is div with the class of, like it says here, card-body, right? So card-body, right? So that's all this. And I want to take the form again. I'm just cutting and pasting here just to make it easier for you to see really quickly and put that inside here, right? So that's what I've done. So here's my card body. And now we've got this other part that's up here on the card. Let's leave it for now like this, and then we can change this more as well. If I go back to what it looks like, it kind of separates it with this little thing, like looks like this, right? It's hard to see up here online, but you'll see that that's what it does. See that? Right? Kind of gives a bit of a border, right? I'm just showing you cards because cards are very popular. That's all I'm saying. Kind of border around everything, right? But there's different kinds of cards. If you look at the Bootstrap, you can add things like text, links, all kinds of other stuff, like card title. For example, I can say, here's my card body, and there's a card title, right? Where card-title is next to an H5 or whatever, right? So if I did that, and if I change this, so my H1 to a class is equal to card-title. Then if I go back to this, you can see that, you know, it kind of changes some of this a little bit. The text size, whatever, is changed. Card-title, right? It's inside the card, but it's not inside the card body, right? The other thing that it also does is this subtitle. So here's my subtitle. Now, normally, notice that this would have been inside the body, right? I'm outside. There's also some card text. I don't have any card text right now, but the card subtitle, and you can see that it says text muted. What text muted does is it creates this gray area like this. So that's what text muted does. And then it says MB-2, MB-2. So let's think about what that does, right? Every one of these classes, they talk about what they do right in here. It says card title is used by adding card title to an H tag, in the same way links are added placing next to each other by adding a card link to the A tag, right? And then it says card subtitle is something else, and you can choose what it's going to look like. So I like this here. This class is equal to card subtitle. Let's try this out. And if I go back to the subtitle, this is a subtitle, right? All fields are required, right? So I'm going to kind of put that in there, and then we're going to put that in there, and let's see what that looks like. So you can see now that it's gray. It's kind of a grayed out kind of thing. It's not the same color as my text. Again, all I'm doing is styling my stuff so it looks a little different, okay? And you may not agree. You might like, I don't like the card. That's fine, right? You mean, you know, the problem with the card, it does add borders, and it does make this kind of small. Maybe 6 is too small now. Maybe I need 7 or something else, right? All right, so let's go back to this. Images, I can add images. I can also add lists, like a list group, which is kind of neat. So you can use cards to make almost like a list that looks like, it's almost like a mobile device list that you see on a mobile device. And you can also have a card header. And this is kind of neat. So I can have this card header and a card footer, right? So you can see that I can have a bunch of stuff. I have a card body, right? There's a list group, and there's a card body again, right? Where I have the title card or whatever. And I can also have some kind of header and footer where I have a featured section up here, and the footer can be further down, and you can see some options here, like this kind of stuff. You can do this, all right? So if I took this div with a class of head footer, right, card footer, or header, I mean, put it in here. So I want to surround the contact us with a kind of a header. So I can tend to do that. I can say, okay, let's put that over here. And inside, I'll end the div tag here for this one. Just to make it so it looks nice, I'll just reformat everything in the document so it's all spaced out nicely. Right? What does that do? Right. Again, what you want to try and do is see the effect of your changes, right? So you see that that's okay, but I don't know if I like this. Almost like I want to put this inside of there, right? Maybe even somewhere else, right? Because this is kind of outside the body. This is the body. This is outside the body, and it's kind of hanging out here. This doesn't look bad, this part here, right? But maybe I want to make it a different color. Maybe I want to make a secondary color or something else. It did give us a little bit extra space up here, which I kind of like. But I'm not sure that I like the width anymore because of how it restricts the width because it's a card, right? So again, what I can do is I can change this to column medium 8 to see if that's a little better. I think it's a little better, right? Still maybe too long. Let's go with 7. Again, you know, trial and error and kind of create some interesting effects. 7 doesn't exactly give you equal numbers, right? Kind of some weird spacing, but it's not as bad as 6, and it's a little better than 8, right? Still, I'm not sure if I like this. And if I wanted to change the background color of the header, there's also control for that. So sizing, it talks about how you can do that with the card body, the card title, the card text, all that kind of stuff as normal. You can change also, if we scroll down here, where everything is, navigation for different kinds of links. And you can do all kinds of stuff with cards. And cards, like I said, are very, very popular. Here's some example of some backgrounds. So where I want to do different cards of different sizes. So if I want to make something with the card itself, where it says the text is white and the background color is primary, right? I can do that for the entire card. I can also do that for the header. So I can say, well, I want the text white for the header, and the background color is primary. Let's take the MB3. The MB3 is more of like how heavy the card is in terms of our. If I put this in the header, let's see what it does. I'll go back to this in a second. So if you go back to this, you can see now that I've got a blue header, right, with a white background, right? Maybe blue and blue doesn't make sense. Maybe I like to do something else. Instead of background primary, I can do background secondary, right, which changes the color, right, to make it kind of match with my theme, right? I can make almost like a gray theme, and then I can change the color to secondary as well for the button, right? I'm showing you this stuff, guys, because it's all in your control, right? When you use Bootstrap. This is why I wanted to use Bootstrap in the first place, right? So now it kind of looks the same. I'm not sure if I like that change, right? Okay. So maybe some kind of theme like that where I have blue, gray, and black. I don't know. And we're going to talk about themes in a bit. You can also make your own custom colors, your own custom themes. And if you use Bootswatch, like I talked about yesterday, there's a bunch of other stuff. But this still is hanging out here. Not sure if I like that. I might want to put this part, that's this part right here, where all fields are required, which is kind of muted, right? Like I said, text muted. Maybe I want to put this H4 thing and the BR. Let's get rid of this BR. I don't need that anymore because that's just a line break that I put in as a placeholder, right? Maybe I want to put this in the card body, like just above the form field. I want to put that in there and see how that looks, right? So you can see now that that's a little better. Right, so all fields are required. I mean, I could make this red if I want, but that's going to look really stark compared to everything else. And I think the size of the fields are okay, but if you really weren't happy with the size of the fields and you wanted to make them bigger, if you go back to forms, you can see that here's form controls, again, like yesterday, and here's sizing. So if I said like form control dash large, it'll give you a little bit bigger, right? And there's the default input, and I can make small inputs as well. And sometimes you want to make this big or small depending on what you're kind of creating. So form control dash large. So if I was to do that, so these are all form controls for the text, right? And if I said form control dash large, just to show you the difference, I can see how that looks. right? So you can check out what that looks like. That's not right, right? In fact, did I mess up? Control dash, oh, form control.large. That's why I messed up. Yeah, so you kind of have to do this too. So to the second, so it's another class that you add on to the form control, like something like this. Did I? Damn it. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so you can make it a little larger. I don't know. I think I might like the large forms a little bit better. I think they're a little bit better. It's not as small as this. And again, I think I might like large inputs for all these things. That's just me. I mean, everyone's got a different way of doing your layout, and you do your layout the way you like. But this is part of this idea of making it quote unquote friendly. I know some people like friendliness. Professor Ilya likes to use that word a lot. I'm more of a, you know, kind of like I want to make it look nice. I think that's the more thing. And I think this looks a little bit nicer. You know, again, do you like this? Do you not like this? It's up to you, right? If you don't want a background color or whatever. I mean, I'm just using something to make my form look a little bit better than what it did before. One thing to note also always is that HTML5 specification for text area allows me to change the text area size. That's not me. That's just HTML5. Now from, you know, if I submit, if I click send, got a problem, right? Because it says this field hasn't been validated. We're not talking about form validation today. That's not what this thing is all about. But I did want to talk about contact form because this is a requirement on your assignment number 1. We never talked about it, right? So questions around forms. I know I made kind of an uglier form here, but again, I'm not sure if I like this color. The more I look at it, the more it's kind of an eyesore, right? For, oops. You're talking about for the actual card itself, for the card? Oh, the font size, these fonts. Yeah, you can change everything. Bootstrap has text, responsive text. It does all kinds of stuff. Like if you look at, I believe it's under layout or content, might be under content. Content has like a whole thing on typography for global settings, for different headings. It talks about what it looks like. And then it even goes into details about, you know, again, text muted. It talks about that, what that does. Like there's a whole, you know, oh, how it changes text size, you mean? Yeah, I think there is something like that in here. It used to be something called dynamic text or responsive text, right? But if you look at it, then I think there's something in here that maybe it's under layout. I'm not sure. But it used to be here under dynamic text, and it kind of makes your text bigger and smaller. But I think part of that is putting it inside of a row and then increasing the size or changing the size of the row, right? But anyways, yeah, so this covers most of it, guys. I don't think there's much else you need. Please you don't necessarily have to copy what I did, you know, as an example. See if maybe primary is the better one to do. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's better. You know, anyways, so because I got my like kind of a blue. Maybe I would have been nice to do is match my blue logo with the blue, or change this blue to that blue, right? That would have been nice. So they're all matching. Otherwise, it's kind of weird. Right? But one of the good thing is that you can see now that I have 3 different pages that allows me to have, you know, 3 different layouts or whatever. And if I was going to do wireframes for each of the pages, have you guys done wireframes before? People are shaking their heads. I don't know. I can't comment. But let's suppose that you need to do wireframes. There's some really cool tools out there to help you out online. One of the best ways to do it is mockups. Here, I'll give this. So mockups is kind of cool. I like this one a lot. There's also draw.io, but I personally like mockups a little bit better. And what this does is it literally allows you to mock up your page. So I'm just going to get rid of all this. So if you look through here, you have a drag and drop interface to create your layout. And I know that this is an extra step, and I haven't required it. I didn't say, hey, by the way, you need to do a mock-up and a wireframe and all that kind of stuff. I never said you need to do that, but I recommend you do it. And the reason why is once you start laying out your page for your website, you know, you're going to get a specification from a client anyway. Sometimes it's on a napkin, You know, we sit down in a cafe, and on a napkin, the client kind of draws out what he wants his page to look like, if he knows what he wants. Many clients don't know what they want. They just say, make me a site that looks like Google, right? Make me a site that looks like Microsoft. Yes, this is not free. Make me a site. No, the trial is you can try it out. So here's where you can try it. Here's my page as an example, and then I want to put some navigation in there. You can actually look through to see if there's anything like a navigation where you can specify stuff. So you can put controls on your page, right? Like if I want to make a bunch of labels, I can drag a label in there. So here's a label, and then I can drag in. They might have inputs, right? So if I go through, here's a stepper control, like progress bar, all kinds of other stuff. I'm sure you can just put in input, kind of thing. So a text area, here's a text input. So I want to kind of put a text input in there where you can lay out your form the way you like, right? You can kind of specify this, a label and an input. And if I want to copy paste, I can do that. It's all online, so there's nothing to download, right? I think it's a pretty good tool to do this. And then if I want to put a submit button at the end, some kind of button. So button, I can grab this submit button here, and I can kind of put this down here, and you can see how it looks like. It's pretty good. There's other tools that are paid for tools like, as an example, that are Adobe-like tools. There's UX Designer. One of the ones I like to use a lot on the Mac is called Sketch. Highly recommend. If you're a designer, you can use a tool called Sketch. That'll be okay. There you go. Which is basically this digital design tool that allows you to sketch out things for mobile and for web. It's really cool. There are other traditional tools as well. Let me just put this mockup one online. So mockups is pretty cool. So I'm going to put this inside of your Slack channel here. So again, Slack mockups. Highly recommend. Free tool. How do you use it though? If it's a paid for tool, how do I use it? Well, I can use the trial version. In worst case scenario, what can I do for now? I know it's cheesy, but you can always do a screen cap, right?
So you can't like create an account and save it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can totally do that. But I mean, I think there's a if you go to sign up and pricing, you can see that there's some some pricing involved, right? But there is some educational ones too. Yes. If you look through. There are some other ways you can do it, so it's not expensive or free, right? So I think that there is a free plan. See, there's a free plan. There's also an educational account that you can go to. I think it's well worth it to check it out. Again, from a planning perspective, it's like if I ever got you to do a website and I said just go do it, right? It's crazy, right? You're gonna waste a lot of time. Like what we're doing, we're just experimenting with how it's gonna look. Here, before you would do any code, you can sketch it out, see if you like it, make a mock-up, and if you like it, then you code it. Right, and you try and do as close as possible to what you got.
Which one do you prefer, mockups or Sketch?
If you got a Mac, Sketch is the way to go. Sketch is a little bit of a learning curve, though.
Sketch looks like it's more like you physically have to use it.
No, it's drag and drop, man. It's drag and drop. Yeah, so Sketch is awesome because like literally what you can do is you have controls on the left. It's much more complete. It's an app only for Mac. The great thing about Sketch is you can actually use a lot of plugins, and what plugins do is actually does all the CSS for you, and does half the code for you too, right? So if you want to actually create a web, kind of a web page, you'd actually create the layout exactly what you see in Sketch. It'll actually output the CSS for you, and you don't even need Bootstrap if it's going to be a static site. What was that?
Maybe I should start using my Mac.
Mac is pretty cool, right? I mean, they got a lot of really cool things that you have. So Sketch is a really cool prototyping tool. And along that, I'm just going to talk about this really briefly because it's not part of our course. You should have had this, a lot of stuff. We should have talked about this in your first course, user interface design, right? Flinto is the other one that goes along with Sketch, right? So Sketch and Flinto, Flinto is like a prototyping tool. So you do it in Sketch, and then you do a click through in Flinto. So before you do any code, you go to your client and you show them a full click through, real prototype. You prototype in Flinto. Okay, one more. Here's another one. Marvel app. Marvel app. I got to do all these ones with you, right? Marvel app is one that is, there are free versions of this app as well. See if I actually have an account that I can log into. Maybe. I don't know. It already exists. I think.
Yeah, that's the creative account.
Hold on. I think I can. maybe log in. So what Marvel does is it's like, so here's my test app here. Here, I was using a test app before for you guys, right? So if I view the project here, you can see I can have multiple screens and I can create my design. And you can also add images from Dropbox and Google Drive and so on. If I want to design something, I can do that. I can start designing my art. Here's an artboard, just like I did in Illustrator. Illustrator is a great tool too. Illustrator is a fantastic tool for figuring out how to do stuff. But again, you have to have an Adobe account. I'm trying to give you some free tools as much as possible. Here, what you do is you can, there are some things that you can do on the left where it says if I want to do an iPhone or web. If I click web, you can see that there are different things you can drag and drop. This is right through marvelapp.com, very popular tool nowadays. So I drag and drop this one. So I want to add this. And again, it's kind of the same thing. It's all web-based in my artboard. It says save failed. Yeah, I know, because I'm not really connected properly. But you can change your artboard size, right? So I believe you can change the size of your artboard to different size. And here's the range, and here's my appearance. I believe my design could have been loaded, but I want to think if I change my artboard, here it is. If I change my artboard to like 1024 width, there we go. And then maybe the height doesn't matter. But you can see that what I can do is I can take the same kind of thing that I have here and maybe expand my page. There we go. And you can see that I have some kind of input field, or in this case, I have a text field, a text editor. And maybe that's not the one I want. But I can see I can pull the same kind of stuff that I do with the other app that I showed you, mockups. I can do here by dragging and dropping basic content. This just has more in terms of if I want to program for an Apple TV, an Apple Watch, an iPad, something else. It gives me other drag and drop options here. So kind of a cool thing. Save failed. Sorry? Yeah, it's a more expensive tool. It's not spelled Azure. It's spelled Axure, right? Like this one you're talking about. Yeah, this is not a free tool. It is a professional tool that a lot of people use. Azure. It's being used by guys at IBM. I know that. I've dealt with people there and some other things like that. But again, there's a lot of prototyping tools. Even if you look at the whole Adobe suite of products, there's a bunch of prototyping tools there too, like Adobe XD or Adobe Illustrator. Like Illustrator can do everything too, right? So, but going back to why did I bring this up is because you guys need to have, let me go back to that Marvel app thing and put that in as an option. So marvelapp.com, I think, is a worthy thing to set up for. And I think there's a free version that you can kind of check out. So let's put this in there. There's Marvel app. That's another one you can try out. And let's just kill this Slack bot. No, this one. No. All right, so that's another one that message. Yeah, so this is the one that you guys can use. So there's one that's mockups, and you can also try Marvel app. Is it required for your assignment number 1? No. Highly recommend though. I think you should try and plan out your stuff beforehand. If you don't plan your stuff out, it's very difficult because then your site will look all over the place. So when I review your assignment number 1, and I go, all right, so it's not responsive, it doesn't look right. It's not balanced. The colors are out of whack, right? Because sometimes people put colors like orange and green in some weird combinations, right? So how do you get color? And I think I talked about color combinations before, but let's just suppose I didn't, right? There are some, if you look at color, Adobe Color, if I'm not wrong, there's a color wheel, color.adobe.com. You don't have to sign in. I'm a user, so I will sign in, right? That's me, I think. Probably remembers who I am, but you don't have to have an account. So the color wheel, what it does is, let me just grab this part as a thing. You need to kind of balance your colors too, right? Because, making your colors anything you want in your design is can be really ugly and really might look terrible, right? So if you notice, what I can do is I can pull off things like monochromatic. So I want a monochromatic color scheme. So let's say I want it all blues or in gray, right? You can also pull the wheel around so you can change whatever color you want to make it so that it's more reasonable in terms of, you know, kind of complementary colors, right? And you can move that, save that whole color scheme, right? Same thing with complementary colors. If you wanted to use some, you know, purples and yellows, that can be, let's say, some kind of purple color for the header and maybe a yellow button. One of those yellow buttons might look okay. You know what I'm saying? Not really a big fan for me, but, you know, maybe you want to do something more like this, which is more complementary. Complementary means it looks nice together, right? There's other ones too. There's, you know, Triad, you know, of different colors, and they have a, you know, special algorithm that kind of calculates these things. This is one tool, another tool that you can use. So Adobe Color, take a look at that to kind of specify what kind of colors you're going to use. The other one I like to use, yeah?
Does it give you the codes or anything?
Yeah, it's right here.
Okay, yeah.
All the hex codes are right here. Right, so you can all the hex codes for the colors. And then there's Material Palette. I think it's called Material Palette. There it is. Material Palette. This is kind of neat. This is a really neat tool too. I'll put this on your stuff. Again, it's not JavaScript right now. I'm talking about design a little bit because otherwise I'm going to get a website on Friday that I'm going to go like, ah, it's really bad, right? The colors might be really weird, right? So what you can do is with Material Design Palette, you can pick 2 colors or 3 colors. I can start kind of like indigo and light green. Do that. I'll create a palette for you. Why am I making mobile? Because we should be mobile centric at this point, right? More often than not, we surf the web with mobile devices just as much, if not more, than, you know, actual websites like on large screens, right? So it's not wrong to be mobile first, right? And think about a palette that works for you, right? So again, I just chose 2 colors here. If I undo those, I can just undo those colors. I can go purple and cyan. I don't know. You can see the differences, right? And it creates a whole palette for you on the bottom, which you can download. It's all free. And how do you do that? You have to make a custom color palette for Bootstrap. I leave that to you. It's not that difficult to do, but if you look at custom, so if I say custom colors, Bootstrap, right? Then if you look at theming at Bootstrap, it'll talk about how to do theming. Now, this one uses Sass. You don't have to use Sass, but you can actually, I'm trying to find something that makes sense for you. You can create your color functions, but I think you can do a lot of your own. This is under Sass. So here's colors for blue and all that stuff, but you can make your own variants. But this is also using Sass. Do you guys know about Sass? SCSS? It's compiled CSS, right? Sorry? No. What it does is CSS, the standard CSS we use, CSS3, doesn't include variables, mix-ins, and all that kind of stuff. And SCSS actually, or Sass, if I was going to look at this, here's Sass. Syntactically awesome style sheets, right there. This is what it stands for. What it does is it gives you CSS with superpower. So let's say if I didn't want to use Bootstrap at all, I could use Sass, or you can use Sass with Bootstrap. And what it does is it allows you to, and there's some standards, there's some documentation and how to do everything. So if I go learn, right, then it talks about how to pre-process Sass and convert Sass to straight CSS. Because the browser won't read Sass. It only reads CSS, right? But Sass, what it does is it makes CSS better because it adds variables and mix-ins and a bunch of stuff that's missing, nesting for CSS and all that kind of stuff. It's missing, and you have to kind of do a lot of duplication with CSS, and Sass takes that away, right? And then it creates this perfect CSS document at the end. Okay, so it talks about how to do everything. I'm not going to cover this in this course. I would not be covering any JavaScript if I did all this, right? And I need to cover JavaScript. That's the main thing I want to cover. But yeah, so this isn't exactly right for theming, but they also talk about Webpack and how to do that, all that stuff in there. But they talk about responsive theming, how to do responsive themes and everything else, and a bunch of available variables So it says here are the available variables for Sass. But if you don't use Sass, then none of this makes any sense. But notice how what you could do is you could just modify some of these variables with your own, and that's what they're recommending that you do. However, there are other ways. If I go back to Bootswatch, like I talked about before, Bootswatch, right? It comes with some free themes and some free themes example, like customizable, the customizable theme. They're tuned for the latest version. For example, if I wanted to use something like Flatly, or I wanted to use something like Darkly or Cyborg or something else, let's use Cerulean as an example. So here's a Cerulean theme, right? It talks about the typography and the quotes and some of the different colors and everything else. It shows you what forms look like and everything else. So this is an example of what the theme is looking like, right? How do I install this theme though? Yeah. How do I do what? Not Bootswatch. No. So this is built with Bootstrap. So wrap Bootstrap. I'm just going to talk about these for a second, right? So if I go to themes, these are all the different themes. And if I go to Bootswatch, it talks about the free themes you can do it. It says easy to install. It says simply download a CSS file and replace the one in Bootstrap, right? No messing around with hex values. So basically just take the this one and replace the min.css with this one. That's all you're doing, okay? So that's what you do. It's kind of simple to do it, right? It's also open source. You can look at GitHub to find that out. So again, so it's customizable. You can modify to death. So if I go back to Cerulean again, and I want to download this one, right? How would I download this CSS file? That's what I would look for. And there's probably some kind of way of grabbing it from. There was actually a link before that they had where I can download the file. If I look at the views page source, I believe that's assets. Here's the style sheet, Cerulean bootstrap.css, this one, right? But I don't want to. There's another way to grab it, not like this. And I forget how. What's wrap bootstrap? Yeah, that's something else. So yeah, so that's. I want you to kind of think about that. Think about theming your web app so it looks like yours. I know someone else put the, you can look at Theme Forest as well. That's a lot of it is paid themes. And I don't recommend you do paid themes for your assignment number 1. There's no need for it. If you really want to, you can, but I just don't see how you'd want to. So here's my API. Bootswatch API JSON, donate. I'm wondering if it's just a theme on. Did I miss it? Yeah. What do you mean? I missed it? What the heck? Here? Download. Did I miss it?
No, it's right below each of them.
Oh, darn. Yeah. Yeah, so you can check it out. I'll be okay. Yeah, it's right here. So yeah, if you download, this is the, so it is the same thing as I saw. But you can do it this way. Let's go back. Thank you for that. I wonder if I can just download the bootstrap.min.css. This is what you want. And what you want to do is take this file, right? So if I want to change it to Cerulean, I could take this file, copy it. I mean, this is kind of the weird way. I can also right-click and save as.
Probably, right-click, save link.
Save link as.
Down below.
So let's say right-click, save link as. And then that would give me the bootstrap.min.css, which I would put inside my document. So if I go to my desktop, so I'm just try and do this for you guys so you see how it is. It used to be a lot easier than this, by the way. Where would it be? Desktop. Here it is. Desktop. And if I go to my 4A, I would probably want to put this inside content as my bootstrap.min.css and rename this to something like Cerulean, right? Bootstrap Cerulean. Because that's what it really is. Bootstrap-Cerulean, right? That min.css. And I put it inside a different folder, and I can repoint to it. The reason why I don't like replacing CSS is because, so here's an example of this, right? So I've got my CSS here, which points to Bootstrap in Node modules. probably wouldn't want to replace this one because then I'd have to re-download it and fix it. I just want to point to my own, right? So I definitely want to override this one. So a couple things to do is if I included it, right, it should override some of the styles, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do is put it in here instead. So I could comment this one out. So I could kind of say something, and this is in my contact form. I could comment this one out by using the comment style. Right, so cut this one and put it over here, and then add in my other one. So I kind of do another link where I add in /, and again, it will be under contents, right? And then inside there, Bootstrap Cerulean, right? So that's the one I would use, right? And that should change my theming for my page nicely, right? 2 seconds, right? So I think it's pretty good. You get a bit better theme. I think I like this more than the one I already had. It's, you know, it's literally like a no-brainer, guys, right? So I think it's a way to go. It helps you out, and you know, it's kind of really cool. Now, if you look at the other, but this is only for my contact page, though. If I go back to my home page, it goes back to black, right? So if I wanted to, all of them would have to be this way. So I'd have to kind of do one of these, and I go to the about page, and I would do the same thing with this part here. So I was going to just replace this link right here. I keep the original link just in case I want to go back for whatever reason. Maybe I change my mind, you know, whatever. You know, but, and again, the other thing that to think about is this. If I use this, there is no CDN for this, I don't believe. Let's just save all. Now, if I go to my home page, it looks like this, right? Here's my about page, kind of a different way of looking at things. And my contact page is kind of looking cool, right? So I think I'm liking this theme, let's say. And now I want to put this up on GitHub, right? So I want to kind of go to my GitHub page, and I'll say changed theme to Cerulean. You guys have that too. All right, so that's theming. Questions around Bootstrap, 12-column grid, all that kind of stuff. We talked about making our contact form. We never had done that before. And I want to move on to the JavaScript that you need for today's exercise. All right. So that's really that in a nutshell. I'm not going to talk more about contact or form validation until there's another lesson. It's all about form validation we're going to get into, right? But this isn't that. So I'm going to go back to my app.js for a second. And we talked about a bunch of stuff, a bunch of ways of debugging. But one of the things that I wanted you to do for today's exercise is I wanted to talk about this idea of a try-catch. So inside of my start function, one person asked actually yesterday, why don't you break this out into regions? Because it's too difficult to read, right? It is too difficult to read for a reason. I want to make it difficult to read. But if you really wanted to, you could split this out into regions. It does support region format, right? Where I kind of put in a region for one or the other. I believe it does a folding regions for a region, and then I think it's n region, right? That's how it works, and you can look that up if you really wanted to try that out. I'm not going to do that right now, but it does support it. But here under start, my start, you can collapse different parts of it, so you don't have to see it all, right? That's what it does. So it collapses different things, right? But if you look through this, now this is interesting. I've got my title for my home and my about, but what happens when it's something else? There's nothing, right? What we can do is we can do something called throw. So JavaScript has a throw function that allows me to throw an error. It creates a custom exception that I can say. So I can throw, and inside throw, I can put in my error, like, you know, title not defined, right? Something like that. My own error that I can generate, right? Here's my title not defined error. So far for my home and about, I'm good. But what about for my contact page, right? So if I go back to my contact page, and if I go into my inspect, and if I look at my console, you can see now that it says uncaught type error, cannot find property text content of null. That's fine. I don't care about that. But it does have a problem, right? It says that at about content, right here it is. Here's about content. I'm looking at my contact page. I'm getting this type error. right, which is on 46. So if I look at 46, it says here's my paragraph content for about content. Well, what happened? Right? What did it go? What did it even go to about content there? Like it's going to this, right? And it's giving me this because there is no my sentence that I'm injecting. And so why here on this page? Well, because here on the top it says about. My page, I never changed my name of my title, so it says about. Okay. I'm pointing this out because the errors happen. You're like, what the hell? Why is this error here? Well, because we're switching on title, right? And I didn't change my title. So if I go back to my about page, and if you look at my title, it says about. This isn't right. In fact, it should be contact. But what if I left it out like this? What would it do? So now, if I go back to console, it says uncaught type error cannot set property of text content of null in about content. Well, hold on a sec. I just did I not just I saved the wrong one. Yeah, I meant this one. I'll be okay. Yeah, it says uncaught title not defined. That's my error. I made that error. I created that error, right? That is, why do we do that? So why do I want to make errors in my page? Because without the title, I can't do anything to this page. I can't remember, I'm switching on title. I'm using my switch case to add code to each of my pages. So a throw statement is for us. We create our own throw statements to say, hey, you're missing something, right? So if I say, hey, worst case scenario is somehow I forgot, right? By the way, this is part of your exercise for lab 4 today. If you look at lab 4, it says put a throw statement. I just did it inside of your switch case, right? So this is something that I've got in here. The other thing that we often do is, what if none of this works? What if I don't have a title? Or what if I didn't put this throw statement in? Let's just take this throw statement out as an example. Or what if I want to handle this exception somehow? I want to have this exception, but I want to handle it. And the way to do that is to create something called a try catch. Now you guys should know try catch from exception handling from C#, yeah? All right, so try catch looks like this. I start the word try. Here's my try. And notice that there is a try catch thing. This is what it looks like. So it's basically a try catch block, right? There are 2 pieces to it. Actually, there's 3. There's try, catch, and finally. Those are the three things, okay? So in the try portion, where you see here on the right, in the try portion of the block, the try portion says, hey, try and do this. That's why it's called try. Try and calculate, 0 over 0. What is that going to? It's going to produce an error, right? Try and do what I'm trying to do. Try and document.element by ID, get element by ID, my funky ID that doesn't exist, right? Try and do that, right? If you fail, go to the catch side. If you succeed, keep going. So it creates a closure where I try and do the commands that I want to try and do, right? And then it catches any exceptions inside the catch part. And then there's a finally. There's actually a third part that doesn't show here, try, catch, finally. And finally says, whether you succeed or fail, do this. That's what finally is. Okay, those are the 3 parts, try, catch, finally. So let's do a try, catch. So a try, catch looks like this. And if I say, okay, well, I want to calculate, if I say, well, let's my, I don't know, my results, we'll call it my result, is equal to, 0 divided by 0, right? That's impossible, right? We can't do 0 divided by 0. Here's the error, right? And what I can do is I can say, catch the error and console out, right? So I can go console out, console.log, right? And I can say something like, error, and then plus my error.message, I believe. I think it's error.message. Error.message. I believe that's what it is. So what error.message does, is it error.message? I have to look that up. But basically this error, it creates an error that I can see what the error message is. So if I save this result, and if I go back to here, well, it did this part, right? But tried to do this. My results is equal to 0 divided by 0. I try to do this. Am I in the right place? Wait, this is for anything. This will work all the time because this is outside of my switch statement. So app started, then try and do this calculation, right? And let's just do error itself. So if I just do error, I think there's two. There's error.message and error.name, if I'm not wrong. If I go error.name, I believe we can actually just change this to error. I think error might be a taken word. Nope, let's try looking it up. So try catch, I'm pretty sure that that's how it works. Try catch JavaScript. 3 school is going to pop up for sure. Here it is, try catch throw. Yeah, I was right. So error.message. But this one, it actually does the inner HTML. It actually attaches this ID to the inner HTML and pops out that message. But what I want to do is that it should point it out. If I did this, what it says to do, it'll actually put it in the page, which I don't want, right? That's what the try catch does. So try basically tries to do something, and then if it doesn't work, do something else. Right here, add alert. Alert, it's a typo, right? It doesn't make any sense. That's why it's failing. Here, somehow it was able to calculate my result, right? 0 over 0 should be undefined. Maybe that it's not undefined. It's good, right? And that's why I'm not getting an error. Haha. But let's try something else. Let's do that thing where I say, you know, alert, right? Hello. Well, there is no alert. So then let's see what that does if I did this one. I go back to here, then I should have that error. Yeah, here's a reference error, right? So what it does is it says, that's the name. And if I say that the error.message, that's the other one. There's two parts, error.name and error.message. And you see the error.message's alert is not defined, right? So you can actually, you know, whatever the alert is, the error, but it doesn't kill my code, right? It doesn't kill my code. So my code continues. Even though I have an error, it tried to do something, it didn't work, and then it continued, right? Whereas if you have an uncaught exception, so this is the idea of catching and throwing. So the reason why it's called a try catch is that the system throws an exception. If something goes wrong, the system itself will throw you an exception. And if you don't catch it, right, then it stops. That's what happens with JavaScript. It won't stop working, right? But if I have a try catch, when I try and do something, it won't stop. It'll allow me to deal with the error, to handle the error. So this is the error handling piece, and this is the error. I'm going to try and do this piece, and I'm going to handle the error here. That's what it does. Now, in C# and in Java and in C++, it's way more complex and way better in terms of error handling. Because what it allows you to do is actually handle different kinds of errors, right? So you can catch different kinds of errors, and depending on what error you get, you can have multiple catch statements. So catch an IO error, catch a syntax error, catch different kinds of error, and then do different things when you catch those errors. Here we catch all errors in this catch-all, right? But we have a throw. I can actually throw an error too, right? So if I throw my own error in here, right? Alert, as an example, I can throw my own error. I can say throw my error as well, somehow. And let's get rid of this. So I kind of did my own error. It'll catch that too, right? It'll say undefined, right? It says throw my error, try doing this, and then it doesn't work because it says, hey, and it says title not defined. That's cool, but something else happened here. I'm trying to have an error message come out, and there is no error message, right? Because throw is not a defined error. It's my own error. I don't know if that makes sense, right? And if you look at W3 Schools, it tells you the same thing. It says that, hey, this is really cool. And all this kind of stuff. I got my try-catch block, and I can make my own throw, too big, 500, whatever. But if I try and catch my own error that I throw, it'll say something like, I got an error, but I don't know what kind this is. Right? That's what it does. And here's an example, kind of a protracted example of an error being thrown if different things happen. If it's not a number, or if it's too high or too low, you can throw different kinds of errors. But these errors that are defined, and notice that what I've done is I've said throw my error, right, in this bracket quotation kind of stuff, So if I hover over it, if I start typing throw, and if I do one of these, that'll work too, my error. Okay. But the problem is that it won't catch anything because it doesn't understand what that is. Right? That's for the message, right? Same thing for the name. Name, my error is not named anything. So it's not like I can catch a name, right? But if I did that other error, if I didn't have this and I did an alert, some weird kind of thing like this, which doesn't exist. Hello. I made a typing error, right? Then it's going to show you the reference error, right, as the type of error that I'm getting. Okay? So try, catch, that's what this does. And then here's my default throw. I can do it this way, or I can, instead of inside my throw statement, I can also do it in quotations. Both are functional. Both work fine, right? Questions around this. So why would I want to do this? Well, what I want to do in the example is I want to surround my switch statement with a try, right? So if I did a try catch, so if I did one of these, I can do this like this. So I can kind of take my switch statement and surround it with a try block, right? And then I can catch the errors in here, and I could actually I can respond to the error. Any error that comes up, I can respond. So I don't have to even catch an error type. So let's undo this. Then do a format document. There we go. So here's my catch. So here's my try. I want to try and do this. And then I'm going to get an error because title's not defined. And then I can do something. Console. Whatever I'm doing here, handling my error. Whatever my pseudocode is going to be to handle my error. I did something here in my catch. I assign my title. Right? So if you look at it here, I notice that I went to handling my error, but I didn't get this throw, not defined, right? Because I handled it. Without my catch, my error stopped functionality of my app. Does that make sense? So when I get an exception, my app stops working, right? When I handle it, it continues, and I can do something else with it. Like, for example, because I handled my error, right, I'm not going to stop working. And that's what this is. So what this does is it bulletproofs your app. If I put my try catch around here and somehow I have this throw where my title is not defined, right? I could put in my catch, something went wrong in the title, right? And that's more logical to put in here. And I can put an info or an error or a warning, right? So console.warn. Remember, there's different ways you can color the console. If I do a console.warn, I can say that something went wrong when switching pages. I don't know what it is. Maybe if I didn't know what the title is, I could figure that out. And if I went back, I can see that I can put a thing there that says something went wrong, man. I don't know why. For me to get to this catch, that means I missed something. Right? Does it make sense? So that's what try catch does for us. Right? Sorry? That's what it is, because we're switching our code with the title, right? And we don't have a title, right? Or I didn't create the case. I didn't create the case for the title to handle the title, right? In this particular case, I don't have the title, and I didn't create the case to handle it, right? So let's create the case. So I'm going to go back to my my page. I know that I have a case where my title is going to be COMP125 dash and then contact. Maybe the title of my page, and then I'm going to do something here. A break. And then under the title, I'm going to kind of access a function that says something like contact content, which I don't have yet. I don't have this function yet, right? Contact, spell properly. Contact content, right? So there's about content, home content, contact content, which is kind of difficult to pronounce, but I don't have that. And then I have to change my contact page's title to match. So it has to be like content or contact. There we go. I don't know why I'm typing an extra E today. But that's now it'll switch properly and I won't get that error. However, I don't have a function called contact content, right? So I got to put that in. So let's do that. So just like I have my about content and I have my home content, I need something else. And I'm going to put that, let's say, somewhere above my start function up here. Function, content. Okay, and right now, that's nothing right now. But it will do something for your assignment too, right? Because we're going to work on this next week when we kind of come back to this, right? So now it goes here and doesn't do anything, and it comes back. So it doesn't really do anything for my content. But now I don't have an error anymore. Hold on, if I go back, there's no error. Yeah? Live hosting? Looking at the time, 12 o'clock. Yeah, I could probably do it one more time. Live hosting, because you have trouble with that? Yeah. All right. Sure. So does that make sense? So what I've done is I've fixed my error. So I have my switch. So we talked about this yesterday and today. We talked about a couple things. We talked about how to catch errors today, how to do exception handling, basic exception handling by handling any kind of exception that comes through. Now, we did this for the switch case, but what if I want to switch through my about? Like, for example, I could put a try catch around all this stuff here, like around all this about content if I really want to, or a specific section of my about content. So I can have multiple nested try catches, right? One for every piece that I think might fail, right? Or I don't know if it's going to work. And a good example of that is if I'm somehow loading files from somewhere. If I was going to do Ajax, a lot of times when we do Ajax, and I'm talking about this in the future, when we do dynamically load files from the server, sometimes it fails, right? So we want to do a try catch to see what happened. Maybe the connection failed. Maybe the link is wrong. Maybe a lot of things are wrong, right? So we can do a try catch so that our application doesn't stop, especially when it comes into a production environment. So imagine if normally I'm scraping a web page. I'm looking at a web page for data, or I'm connecting to a database somehow, right? But my database connection stops, right? Do I want my client's page to break? That would be bad, right? I don't want that to happen. So what I want to do instead is do a try catch and say something like no connection to database, right? Maybe do even something like put on there inside the web page, like physically add like content in the middle of the web page, in the middle, like its own customized content that says, your connection database failed, right? That's cool. That's a good thing to use a try catch for, right? Where we get some really good errors coming through. One of the ways Bootstrap can help us with this, right, is if you look at Bootstrap again, is it has other components that can help us. So remember, we have components, cards, we have forms, and then we have something called a modal, right? So really what a modal is it pops up this little message like this, right? It's not an alert. Please do not think of it as an alert. But it does pop up and it looks really nice and it's styled properly and everything else. And what you can do is you can actually program the modal. So here's a dialog with the content and the header and the title and all this kind of stuff. And typically what this thing is, it's hidden, right? So this class, whatever it is, it's hidden until there's a problem. And when there's a problem, poof, it comes up. It kind of shows up when there's a problem. To make this whole thing hidden, and then we make it go. So here's the live demo. I'm going to launch my modal, and you can see how it comes up. That's what it would look like. So if you have no connection to the database, this might be a solution to that problem, right? And how does this work? Take a look at this. It says button, type button. Here's button primary. Data toggle modal, right? Data toggle, what it does, it turns on and turns off. Data target, example modal. Right, here's my example modal right here. This is the ID for this whole div tag, right? And notice where it says my role is dialog box. It's my example, and I believe, if I'm not wrong, it's probably hidden at the beginning. Like it's not available for you to see. This is not on or whatever, right? Here's my modal and my modal body, my modal footer, and all that kind of stuff. And then what that can do is it can show up when you need it to show up, right? If somehow something happens, I can toggle it on or toggle it off, right? And then it has some special effects, modal fade, as an example. And you can kind of center it as an example. There's different ways of doing things in terms of popovers, right? And a bunch of other really cool effects, right? Using kind of some kind of grid, like it's almost like a mini web page, right? That you can kind of pull up, which is way more control than using an alert or a confirm, right? So really, really cool stuff, you know, where you can send messages, you can do all kinds of stuff. And I think there's nothing wrong with using these kinds of modals for alerts, right? I'm not going to go through that. That's a you to do, not me to do, because I'm going to take too much time doing this and I won't show you JavaScript, right? All right, so questions around try catch. I think that's part of your exercise. If we go to the exercise online here for your stuff for week 4, it's very simple. It says exactly what we would do. So use the exercise files from class, surround the switch statement with the start function try catch block. I did that. Add a default case switch, which we already have. The start function that throws an exception that indicates the programmer the page style is not found. We did that too. So if you just follow this and hand it in, you're good to go. You get your 1% for being here. Yay. If you're not here and you want to try this at home, go ahead. Try it at home. And you can do that. That's what's due today. It's kind of a simple lab to do, but it gets you to try and do it if you haven't tried to do it already. I'm not asking for anything special with this lab. It just follow this and stuff. Just follow the things I did. Don't try and hand in mine. Hand in your own, please. Right, if you can. Downloading mine, and I mean, it's your exercise, your lab to learn how to do try catch, right? And what this try catch stuff can do for you. So any questions around your lab? It's pretty simple. Let me get back to that hosting stuff because you asked for the last 10 minutes and we're kind of almost there. So let's get to that hosting stuff one more time. So one thing I didn't ask for this lab is I didn't ask you for you to host. So what if you're hosting every time? Like last assignment, I got you for lab 3, I got you to host. But now for assignment number 1, I'm getting you to host. And you're going to use the same host for GitHub pages that you've used for lab 3. You're going to use it for assignment 1. And it's going to overwrite each other because you can only have one, right? So what I could do in my github.io, right, first of all, is I could have subpages, right? So if you look at my Siliopoulos.github.io, here it is. This is the equivalent of what you were doing, right? And notice that I have a page here. So here's my index and everything else, and it's kind of the front page. But there's nothing stopping me from having a dashboard, right, from my main page, right, and then subfolders. So what do I mean by dashboard? Like, here's assignment 1. Here's lab 1. Here's lab 2. Here's lab 3. There's been a bunch of links for those things. And when you go to lab 1 or assignment 1, you see assignment 1, right? And assignment 1 would be inside of a folder. So let's suppose that this whole thing here, instead of being what it is, I want to keep the no Jekyll and the CNAME outside, right? Because that's going to be in my folder, right? In my outside folder. But what I want to do is, for a second, I'm going to swap out. This was from a previous lab, right? So if I go to show you what this is, okay, so I've got 2. And I have this one lesson 4, and I have whatever I put in here. It might have been lesson 3. Let's just say, right? So how do I check that? Well, if I go here, and as long as this is all saved, and there are a couple changes, I changed these 2 things. I'll say added try catch to start. Right? I did a bunch of other stuff too, but that's one of the things I did. I probably could have had more commits in there. And I'm going to put this up on GitHub just so that it's complete. There it is. But now I'm going to download this other one. So I'm going to kind of go here and say, what was on this page right here? So if I do that, and this is my for my GitHub pages, right? And I want to see what that looks like. I can go to light-server. And when I do that, it's going to kind of bring up this lesson from a previous time where it's like, this is like lesson 3, right? With no contact page. Lesson 4 has a contact page. So I want both. And I want them both live on the internet, right? So the thing to do is inside of this, you create a folder. So let's just go in here. Now this Git, you need to keep there, okay? Because that Git folder is for the entire github.io repo, okay? So I don't want to change this right now because I'm going to add to it. I'm going to modify stuff. And you're going to see this in a second, all right? So I'm going to go new. I'm going to new folder. And let's just call this lesson 3. I'm going to take this whole contents, everything here, except for the CNAME and the no Jekyll, because I need those 2 things, right? So all of this other stuff, I'm going to drag and drop it into lesson 3. And it's not letting me because I'm looking at it right now. Hold on. try again. Okay, so there's lesson 3. And let's do the same thing for lesson 4. So I'm going to go into lesson 4. Lesson 3, by the way, does not have its own Git repository, right? Because remember, it's just my live production version of my lesson that I'm putting up on live, okay? So that's lesson 3. And let's put another one for lesson 4. So I'll make a new folder. So I can go new folder. And let's make that lesson 4. Imagine if you had assignment 1, assignment 2, whatever. You can have all of them up here for me, right? If you really want to show them all to me. So here's lesson 4. I know that it's contained in this. I'm going to grab all this except for the Git repository. I don't want that Git repository for lesson 4. Copy it, right? And go into lesson 4 and paste. And you can see now that I'm going to have all those things I just did in lesson 4 right here, right? So 2 different lessons, lesson 3 and lesson 4. But I needed kind of a start page to get there, right? So I have lesson 4 and I have lesson 3, and I need some kind of index page to get me there, right? Now, it would be nice for it to have an overall arcing project that takes care of everything else. So, damn, you give me 10 minutes to do all this. I don't know if I can do it all in 10 minutes, right? But what I could do is have a node modules folder only for my arcing project, another project that surrounds all the other projects, all right? Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can do this in a real quick time. So I need almost like another structure around everything else. So I could create the outer structure. So I could say something like, this is my project for all the projects, right? So I can go a content folder. I can add a scripts folder. I don't need it for now because I'm not going to use custom scripts. Here's my scripts folder and my content folder. Maybe some assets if I wanted to do another asset. So a folder for assets, right, if I really wanted to. And then now when I look at my Visual Studio Code, you're going to see that I have my assets and lesson 3 and lesson 4. Lesson 3 and lesson 4 are their own websites, right? But I need an index.html here. So I'm going to add a new index.html file out here. New file, index.html. And I can do the whole thing I did before with, I'm just going to copy paste one of these for a second, just because I don't have no time. I'm going to go to my index page here. I'm going to grab all this contents. I don't have node modules, but I'm going to get them in a second. And again, this is kind of inefficient if you think of what I'm going to do, but it's okay because it's self-contained, if you will, as well. So in my index page, just put that in there. I don't have a Jumbotron, and I have nothing like this here. So no node modules here. Now, what I could do if I was really crazy is pull up my node modules and only have one node modules that all the other ones point to. A lot of work, though, right? And I'm a lazy guy. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to copy node modules out to its own node modules, like as if I downloaded it. I don't need a package.json at this point because, I mean, unless I want to do an npm install all those things that I already had, that's crazy, right? So I don't want to do that again. So I want to kind of go in here, grab node modules, copy it. Just copy this whole thing because it's the same thing that I'm using everywhere else. I'm just grabbing lesson 3s. Did I include anything in lesson 4? I don't think so. And then just kind of put it out here, paste. There's node modules out here. So this node modules is the one for my overall arcing project, right? And if I was going to show you what this looks like server, for this one, you can see that I have a page that has nothing on it right now. Why? Should show me my stuff. Did I save it? I did not. Did not save my index page. It goes to node modules. Why is it not working? Did I look in the wrong folder? Might have looked in the wrong folder. Yes. I'm skipping steps here, guys. I'm sorry. It's trying to do an app.css. You know what? I'm not going to use that. There's not going to be a custom CSS I'm going to use right now. And I'm also not going to do my own custom JavaScript for now. I'm just going to use Bootstrap because this is just the page that's going to say, this is going to be my, instead of hello world, this is going to be my dashboard. And again, I'm not putting it up until I know it's going to work. So this is my dashboard page. So let's get rid of all this button stuff, right, for now. And let's try that again. Light-server. Cool. At least I got this. Now I'm not getting this because I'm not connecting to node modules somehow, right? And if I look at my inspector, I can see that in my console, it says refuse to apply style from local 3000 Bootstrap Cerulean because I don't have that somehow. I wouldn't, right? I wouldn't have Bootstrap Cerulean because I don't have that. And that's why I'm getting this error. So let's get rid of this. I copied the wrong one. Copy less than 3, not less than 4. Put that Bootstrap one back in. Remember I told you about like copying the Bootstrap. I might need it again. There it is. I need it again, right? All right. There we go. There's my dashboard. So now what I have is instead of this about, home, about, and contact, I have home, but I want to change the about and contact to less than 3 and less than 4. So if I go back to this, right? So I can say this is less than 3. This is my home page, but this is less than 3, and this is less than 4, right? Now, my lessons, that doesn't make any sense for these font awesome icons. See, you killed me, man. All these things I got to do now. So I got to make sure it makes sense, right? So font awesome. If I type in lesson, it's probably not going to be anything that I like, right? But what if I type in like learn? You know, I might have one of these, right? That looks pretty good. So what is that? That's probably, it says lean pub. Lean pub. Let's try that out. So lean pub. Lean pub is one word. Lean pub. And let's get rid of that extra U, E. And let's try that out. So if I can see that working. And now, where's my page? This one. Assets, logo 3. I don't have my logo. Let's get rid of my logo because, of course, that's another error. Because there is no logo 3. I don't have a logo for my page. You would have a logo. But if I wanted to, I'm going to grab my asset from here and grab all this, copy it, and go into my assets on the outside. So there's a project on the outside, and there's a project on the inside, right? That's what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. And let's just reload in my crazy style. Okay, there we go, right? Less than 3, less than 4. Now these are pointing to the wrong things, so we're going to fix that. We need to point them to the lessons, right? So how do I do that? Well, this is not the about page, it's not the contact page. It's got to point to the lessons. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out and go // and I'm going to go into lesson 3. And I'm going to go to my index, right? And then similarly, it's going to be lesson 4 index. So this is going to be here and kind of over here and lesson 4 index. Does that make sense? So I have 2 different pages, lesson 3, lesson 4. And when I go back, if I click on lesson 3, I see lesson 3. If I go back, I see can go to lesson 4. There's lesson 4 with a cerulean background, right? And now I want to put all this up online, right? Because I have an outside project, which is my dashboard, which has lesson 3, lesson 4. You can do this too if you really want to. So if you want assignment 1, assignment 2, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3, all these different labs that you want to put up, you can do that with one GitHub.io page. So you don't have to have multiple pages. You don't have to worry about that. That thing solves your problem, right? So how do I do this now? So that's the one piece, but I have 639 files because I added a bunch of other files and I had more files. Node modules are copied like 5 times. Who cares, right? For now. In our example, it's okay. In real world, someone's watching this and they're going, don't do this, Tom. Don't show them this. It's the worst thing ever. And it's true. You wouldn't want to duplicate your node modules. You just want to use them over and over again, right? I would have one node modules on the outside and all the inside projects point to them. Yeah.
Normally also only want one index.
You only want one index, but you can have multiple indexes if you want to. In this case, it's okay. It won't have any negative effects because it's under a different folder.
I just know in the future, that's one thing they drilled in high school. Is you can have one index. Yeah, like for example, when you did this, if I go to my lesson 3 and if I click home for whatever reason, sometimes that'll cause a problem because // I didn't put // I put // Yeah. If I put // it'll go to the other index, right? That's a problem.
So that's why I put /. That's why it's okay to do this. All right, but how do I fix this now? Because I have like no time. So we'll talk about other things later. So if I go here, and if I want to go to my terminal, I want to do my git. So I want to say kind of git add dot, just like I normally do. Now what this is going to do, remember there is no internal git folders, only the external one from my github.io page. The internal git folders are gone. I removed them because this is not my development website. This is my this is my production site. My production site only has one git folder, and that's the outside one, right? You guys are going to be confused by that, I'm sure. But anyways, if you look at this now, I've kind of added this in. Now I'm going to say git commit -m. I'll say added dashboard and lesson structure. Kind of a big commit. I don't like doing that. It's usually the commit should be small. And then I'll say git push origin master. How come I can do that? Because I'm already connected to my github.io, and now I'm adding my whole lesson. So that's done. I should be live now. So if I go to me, if I'm right, it may take a second or so, but if I go here, it should pull up. No, it didn't. It should pull up my lesson, and if I refresh, the reason why this is not working is because it takes a second for my live site to go up, right? For you to check this, you can go to your GitHub page, so GitHub, and remember that it's my whole GitHub page itself, not for whatever it is. If I go to my profile, make sure this is right, and I didn't screw up. And here, if I go here, this says 40 seconds ago. This is a good indicator that I did it right, right? 40 seconds ago, it says that I have this page, and if you look at the commits, this is important. See these little check marks here? These check marks mean it's live. If you don't have a check mark on this, on these commits here like this, it means somehow it failed for whatever reason, okay? So it says it's live, but the problem is it takes a second for it to propagate across the internet. And also I'm cached. My browser's got caching on. So if I go here, it may not work, right? But if I do another browser, I tried this before, it failed. But if I go to Firefox here, and if I put my thing in, I might be okay. You see, so it did work. So now let's check and see if lesson 3 and lesson 4 works. Lesson 3, I'm good. I can look at my about page. I can go back. I can go to lesson 4. If I keep going back, here's lesson 4, and here's my cerulean. Everything is online. And this is a way to have one github.io page, but handles all your assignments and labs and everything. Okay? Questions around this? Yeah, no, there's not different repositories, different folders with different websites. That's all I'm having. So I have one repository, and I have an outside website, a wrapper that wraps everything else. And then I have different folders that have websites inside of them. That's all I'm doing. Okay? Different folders, but only for your github.io page. Don't do this for your repository, for each individual repository. This is just for your github.io for your production site, the one I'm going to see.
I might even rename the indexes because it feels wrong.
Okay. Yeah, be careful, though, because I might mess you up.
You have to make sure you put it right.
Okay, I'll come back to you in a second, but I got to end this one. So that's it for me for this week. If you have, again, remember that Friday, 2 things. So tonight, the lab is due by midnight. Lab 4 is due tonight by midnight. And Friday, your assignment 1 is due by midnight. So please have your assignment 1 due or in as soon as you can. Okay, and that's it for me this week, guys.